I love
life
that painting
sciences
behind you,
marketing.
by the way. You didn't paint that, did you?
Which one?
The one to your right.
This
That
one?
one? Uh-huh.
Yes. This one
You
I
did?
did.
That's
That one
beautiful.
Basquiat did. So,
That one you did is
ah,
beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah. And really what I'd like to talk about is something. I love the book, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I actually read the book. I don't know how many people you talk to interview you have not read the book, but I have read the book. Something that intrigued me in there, it says, "A Death in Denmark has been in the making for many years." And so how many years has it been in the
Oh,
making?
about a decade, I think.
Really?
Yeah, because first, I don't write mysteries. This is my first mystery. It's my ninth book, but my first mystery. And I always wanted to write a mystery, but I just wanted to kill a politician. There's this right-wing politician.
So it took 10 years to write.
Uh, it did take 10 years because, I mean, we started, I say we because I told my husband, I said, oh, I want to write this private investigator book. I'm a big fan of, you know, Philip Marlowe and Spencer and Easy Rollins. And, I always wanted to write it. And I always thought, well, it'll be so repetitive. I'm just going to write the same story. Um, but then we started to talk about this character and we started to cook him up. And because I had a name I liked. So it started with that. And we decided he was going to live in these houses that are called Kartoffelrijkerhus. They're these potato town houses. And that he'd be a constant renovator, because so many Danes are, especially these houses. And I wanted to, I'm a big fan of Nordic noir. I love Jo Nesbø and Stieg Larsson, but they're all so bloody. And when you read these books, outside of like the fact that nobody should go to the English countryside because everybody gets murdered out there, it's like Scandinavia is like just serial killer haven. But it's not, especially, I mean, whenever you read these books, they're also dark and dreary. You watch the TV shows like The Bridge or The Killing, the women don't know how to dress or the men don't know how to dress. Somebody has trauma, alcoholism, raped in childhood. Always, I mean, it's like drug addiction. It's like big trauma. But when you meet Danes, they're pretty happy, well-adjusted people, and they dress really well, and they bicycle everywhere. And so I wanted to write a detective who is well-adjusted, has his own issues, but more or less is functional in society. So we started to build him up, and so I knew who he was, but I honestly didn't know how to write it because I didn't know how to plot, and I still don't know how to plot, which means you can't not plot in mystery. I can do it in a normal book and see, oh, let's see where it takes me. Here it's more like you don't want to come to the end and you're like, I forgot to put the butler in and he was going to be the killer. It's never that easy with mystery. So you need to know what you're doing. So I had to go back and forth and it was a lot of work. But it was COVID. We all didn't have anything better to do. I was working for a life sciences company, a diagnostic company. So I was very busy. But, outside of reading papers about COVID, this was the outlet. And this became a topic of discussion in our home as well, because my kids were home and we would all sit at the dinner table and I would tell them what was happening in my story. And so that's sort of how long it took to get the book done. I needed a pandemic to convince me that I could write a mystery. I didn't even tell my agent. I wrote it and then I called her and I said, hey, guess what? I wrote a private investigator book. And she's like, okay. She's never sold a mystery. I've never written a mystery. So you were a great pair trying to make this one work.
Wonderful. Well, I assume there was a lot of research involved in
Oh,
this.
yeah. Also, good
But
thing there was a pandemic. So yeah, lots of
so,
research.
but you've got them in Denmark. You've got them going to Germany. You've got references to other countries. You've got police procedural going on. There just seems to be a huge amount of research that had to go on behind this to make it believable. So let me ask you a couple of questions about that, because
Sure.
research is one of the hardest things for writers, I think. Plotting is difficult as well, but research is one of the most difficult, because there's and we'll get into this here, but for you, is it research first, story first, or do they work concurrently as you're plotting it out? How does that work for you?
The story first. So I knew the story, and I kind of knew that it was connected to World War II, and I knew there was the prime minister was involved. I had like a few things, but I didn't know, and I knew enough about World War II. I mean, you live in Europe, you kind of pick it up, and we've all watched Schindler's List, and the usual. But I knew a little bit more about Danish World War II history. Just the stuff that you hear, and my husband told me a few things, um, but I didn't know the details. And a big part of this was learning all of that. And it was kind of a journey both for my husband and me, because these were things he didn't know either. Like whenever I thought of World War II and Denmark, you think about, oh, they saved all these Jews. They saved all these Danish Jews and sent them to Sweden. We all know that story. Then I find out, oh my God, all these Jews had to pay money to go across to Sweden. And I told my husband, did you know that? He's like, yeah, kind of, maybe something. I knew that they had killed some of the collaborators, but I didn't know how insidious it was. I didn't know about what they did to these women who they called, the Tyskepia, the German girls, because these were young girls who probably fell in love with Germans, or some girls were raped. I mean, it was not, and they were, kind of humiliated on the streets. So I started to think about, okay, what else do I not know about this time in history? And as we dug into it, I found all this information about how Danish society lived. And this is a new thing even for Danes, because Danes have also kind of embraced this, oh, we were fabulous during World War II. But the fact remains that, Hitler looked at Denmark as this, this example of how a German state should be. And a lot of Danes in the beginning believed that they'd be a German state like Bavaria. And if you look at the border between Germany and Denmark, it's shifted so much here and there. And so Danes kind of accepted, okay, they're here. This guy's going to win the war. He looks like he cannot be defeated. Might as well, suck it up and get on with it. And the Danish society did very well. So the research for that, I read a lot of papers that have been written from that time. I found the books that have been written, but more about, because when you just do a search, you will get the Danish heroes. You will get all the saving of the Jews. They will talk about the resistance. There's this famous Danish movie called Flammernes Tårn, which is about Holger Dansk, which was this resistance movement. So you get all these stories, but then there are all these other stories of collaboration. These are companies that still exist. I mean, FL Smith, Aalborg Cement, these are big Danish companies, construction companies. They exist today. I have friends who work in these companies. And I think, probably we know about Chanel and Porsche, but these are Danish companies and nobody talks about them. And you find out these companies made insane amounts of money. They built the bunkers. They send labor to Kronstadt and other places in Europe to build concentration camps. Also, you find out that Danish construction workers didn't have a choice, because when you're part of the union and you get a job and the job is in the Czech Republic, you can't say no. If you say no, you get no money, because you're saying no to a job. The union is saying, here's a job, go do. So a lot of Danes ended up having to do this by force. And nobody talks about that either. Danish society thrived. The small businesses, when they do the analysis, that small businesses grew percentage-wise during that time, because there was a lot of business. And Germans were kind of part of Danish society, especially for, till about 43-ish. It was fine. And the Danish politicians were involved deeply in the collaboration. They were part of it. 1943, once Germany looked like they were losing the war in Russia, the resistance movement started to come up and people started to kind of evolve. So the research kind of had to be broken down in many ways into looking beyond what is available, what people
Where
like to
where
talk about.
where do you find that? Two-part
So
question. Where do you find that? And also, how do you know it's real news?
yes. So studies, you go read a lot of the studies that are available. So luckily, my husband's doing a PhD. So he had his student ID, so I could download a lot of these for free. Otherwise, I'd be paying for it. But there are a lot of, um, also my background, I work in diagnostic companies. I read a lot of clinical studies. So these are all peer-reviewed papers that are based on, historic research, and they are authentic. They're peer-reviewed, so they are published. So that is a great source, a reference, and you can just go to your library and get access to it as well. So if you're looking for that kind of historic research, this is the place to go. Clinical studies and peer-reviewed papers, peer-reviewed clinical studies, these are some of the most, they're laborious. You have to read through a lot to get to it. And it's pretty, it's not fiction. They're just throwing the data out there, information out there, but it's a good source, especially for writers, for us, because we need to know about, 200% to write 5%. To feel comfortable writing that 5%, you need to know so much more. I could write actually a whole other book about everything that I learned at that time. And that is a good place to go. So I recommend going and doing, not just looking at, Wikipedia and all that good stuff, but actually going and looking at those papers. So, and then when you read a paper, you see there are like 15 other sources for those papers. And then you can go into those sources and learn more. I was also fortunate, as soon as I got vaccinated, I was missing Denmark so much. So I went to Copenhagen for a week alone. And they had this exhibit, and it's a permanent exhibit now, about World War II. And the exhibit was fantastic because it was kind of an interactive exhibit that was set up from the point of view of three people during the occupation. One was a collaborator, one was somebody who was in the resistance movement, one was unsure about which way to go. So and I think that kind of also inspired me into seeing kind of, because the way they had done it, I walked the streets of Copenhagen to see what was happening, and they did it really well. And then there were some books there. So I got those books. And then when you read those books, you will see more sources. You can go into that source material.
How do you know when to stop?
I think depending upon who you are, the way I was doing it is I research as I write, and I do it constantly. Simple things. I'm writing and I'm like, oh, he has to turn on this street. What street was that again? I can't remember. I have maps open constantly. And I know Copenhagen, the city, very well, but I'll forget the street names. That sometimes takes work. I'm just writing the second book, and I wanted him to go into this cafe. And it turned into a 3-hour research session, because that cafe was a cafe where Dan Turell, which is a famous Danish writer, used to go. So suddenly I'm like, oh my God, what was that book? Who was in that book? Because I've read his book, the only one that was translated into English. And you got to pull yourself out of that hole, because literally that was one paragraph, and I just spent 3 hours going into it. And now I know way too much about this cafe that I didn't need to know about. It was a cafe in a building where he was going to go meet somebody. I don't even think he went into the goddamn cafe. So I think, again, to write that 5%, I needed to know 200%. So depending upon the kind of writer you are, I am curious. I like to know this. So suddenly now I have that cafe on my list, because we're going to Copenhagen in a few weeks. And I'm like, oh, we need to go check that out. I think you have to kind of, as you write, you will see, okay, now I got all the information that I need. But as I was editing, again, I was like, is this really correct? Did I get this information correct? Let me go check again. But I think it is healthy for writers to do that, especially if you're going to write historical fiction or any kind of fiction that requires research. The book I'm working on is about money laundering, and it is based on kind of a true story, as in Danske Bank, like Deutsche Bank and all other European banks have been doing money laundering for Russia for years. Again, the details there, because I don't know enough about money laundering. I don't know what that, I mean, yeah, I have an idea from watching mob movies, but I don't really know. So then I'm talking to bankers, and I met this FBI agent. So I'm asking him, hey, who does this kind of, who in the US would be looking into money laundering? And then he's saying the Secret Service. And I'm like, really? I didn't know that. When I'm looking at Danish police, I went and read the Danish police handbook, which now I had it kind of used Google to translate it, and shocked to find that, and I didn't know this, and my husband didn't know this, that racial profiling is supposed to be a tool used by Danish police to, keep the peace, so to speak. I didn't know that. I don't know, a lot of Danes know that. It's a bit surprising, right? That it's in the handbook. So I think with research, you have to kind of find the source always. It's tempting to just end up in Wikipedia because it's easy. You get there. But, Wikipedia has done a pretty decent job of asking for sources. And I always go into the source. You can keep going in and find the truth. One of the stories that really I read Exodus while I lived in India a million years ago. I was a teenager, and I don't know if you've read Leon Uris's Exodus, but there's this famous story in that book about the Danish king. When the Germans came, they said, oh, they're going to ask the Jews to wear the Star of David. And the story goes, based on Exodus, that the king, actually King Christian, he rode the streets. And this is a king with like tattoos and stuff, and he rode the street with the Star of David. I thought that was an amazing story. That was my first introduction to Denmark, like hundreds of years before I even met my husband. And that story stayed with me. And then I find out it's not a true story. She never said, let them eat cake. And so it was like, oh, just like everybody
So Washington did not chop down the cherry tree.
No, and the apple didn't fall. And, just like it, I mean, it's simple things we do that, right? With Casablanca, it's like you say, play it again, Sam. And she never said that. She said, play it. Because I watched the movie too many times. And you realize these become part of the story. And so research helps you figure out, okay, that never happened.
When you say that you're writing and you're incorporating the research into it, sometimes you're not in a spot where the research goes into it. So how do you organize your research that you're not immediately using?
Well, I don't do that.
Okay.
I'm sure there are people who do that well. I'm sure there are people who are like more disciplined than I am. I'm barely able to plot my life. I mean, it's hard enough. So, if I do some research, I know there are people who take notes. I have notes, but those will be basics on this guy's name is this, his wife is this, he's this old. Please don't say he's from this street, he's living on this street. Some basics I'll have so I can go back and look. But a lot of the times I'm like, what was this guy's husband doing again? I have to go find it. I won't read the notes, in all honesty, even if I make them. So for me, it's important to go in and look at that point. And this is why maybe it's not the best way to do the research. It takes longer. Like I said, you spend 3 hours doing something that is not important. But hey, that was kind of fun for me. I was curious. And curious to remember about Dan Turrell's books because I hadn't read them in a while. I take my time, and I think I really like the research.
I do too.
I have fun doing it. I think
I think a lot of writers do, and they don't know when to stop. I think that just because it's fun. We like to learn new things.
Yes.
And it's fun. Does it hurt? This is a humorous question. Does it hurt to leave some of the research out?
Oh my God, yes. So my editor said, Amulya, we need the World War II stuff more. I'm like, oh, really? Watch me. So I, incorporated her edits, and then I spent all this time, and I basically wrote the book that my character, that the dead politician writes. I wrote like a large part of that book and put it in, in this book. And I put footnotes. My editor calls me and she goes, what the? And she's like, oh, like, I don't think we can have footnotes in fiction, Amulya. I'm like, really? And she goes, you can make a list of all of this and put it in the back of the book. We'll be happy to do that, but you can't have footnotes. I felt so bad taking it out because this was really good stuff. These were important stories.
You feel like you need to write a nonfiction book.
Exactly. And that's what I did. Like, partly I wrote that nonfiction book that she was writing and mixed it with fiction. But then, like I said, I did all kinds of research for that. I went and read secret reports, the daily reports that the Germans wrote, because you can find pictures of that. I kind of went in and did all of that to kind of make this as authentic as possible. And then she said, could you please make it part of the book and not as, she's like, people are going to lose interest. So yeah, it does hurt. It really didn't make me happy to do that.
Let me ask you this in a humorous note too. You actually, and the reason I ask is because I've never had the nerve myself as a writer to write from the point of view of a woman.
Oh boy, yeah, that was
you
a
wrote
tough one.
you wrote from the point of view of a man in a joking but yet serious way. Do you have to research how a man thinks versus a woman?
I'm surrounded with men. I have 2 boys and a husband, and the husband is middle-aged, white, and Danish. So
living with them is research.
Absolutely. And they actually helped once in a while. My husband's like, yeah, we don't talk like that. I'm like, really? You seem the type who would. I'm like, no, nobody's going to say that. They may think it, but they're not going to say it out loud. I'm like, okay, I'll take that out. It was hard. First, it was the male point of view. Second, it's a white male point of view. And I was like, who do I think I am to even write this? And my husband's like, so many men write from me, colored women's point of view. You can do this. You've been living with me for 25 years. But that took a little bit of courage. But once I got into it, I was okay with it. I got comfortable with it. I got to know him. Once I got to know him, it wasn't a problem, and it came easily. But I had my moments. I felt like a complete fraud most of the time. I thought people are going to read this and go, well, he sounds like a chick, because it's kind of, but honestly, this was my first time, a book that I got 2 offers for. I've never gotten 2 offers from 2 publishing houses. And I joke, or maybe I am serious, if I'd known better that if I wrote from a white man's perspective, I can sell a book faster, I would have done it a long time ago. Right?
Right.
Who would have thought?
There may be some truth in that, though.
But it was, I wanted him to not be white, but he kept being white. And I tried for him to be half something else, and that didn't work. And ultimately, I realized that I want to tell the story from a white man's perspective, because I can't seem to not. But I think it also allowed me to look at society in a different way. One of the things that I saw, my husband had all these, I met my husband in Memphis, and he had all these ideas about Denmark. And whenever we went, it was, for a few days, a week. Bakeries are great, and it's such an egalitarian society, and all of that. And then we moved and we started living there. I'm like, the bakeries are kind of okay. I mean, the bread's nice, but seriously, it's okay. It's nothing to write home about. And not egalitarian in the sense, sure, a man knows which side of the vacuum cleaner to use, but the glass ceiling is made of steel in corporate Denmark. When they show pictures of top 50 most influential people, and all white men, Like there'll be one woman, but that's because she's, so-and-so's daughter. I think when you come back, or when you look, he started to look at Denmark through my eyes in some ways, right? He started to see how the immigration system is so difficult, and kind of starting to understand, okay, these are the things I thought I knew, but this is not how the world is here. And because of that, I felt maybe, and this is looking back, that Gabriel was seeing these things through the eyes of his friend and his, ex-girlfriend, and he's looking at Denmark from different eyes, and he's seeing different things. And he's able to be more conscious about his privilege and understand it better. So, but I have to say, it was I had my moments. I kept thinking, oh, you know what? I'll make him a woman. I tried that too. Refused to be a woman. So I think once you get to know them, it becomes easier. So go for it.
In your research, because you're obviously dealing with several social issues in the book, at the end of it all, just curious, because social issues are something that always seem to get on my mind and drive me nuts. Did you find any justice at all at the end of it all?
Oh, in the book or in real life?
Well, I've read the book. The book is what it is. I'm talking about you in real life.
No. You have to accept. And it's like, now I've been in the corporate world for 25 years. And as I have been working, they keep saying, oh, leadership. Every time you go on LinkedIn, there'll be 15 people talking about leadership. And it really was important to me. And I worked at becoming a really good leader, and I tried and I learned. And then you realize nobody cares. I'm sorry, nobody cares. Companies don't care about leadership. Companies don't care about engagement. Companies care about revenue. And there is no justice in that. And it's the same way how I feel about Denmark, is that the xenophobia is so ingrained that there is nothing you can do at work. And this was not very long ago. So it was about 7 years ago. And I was working for a multinational global company. If what happened there happened here, I don't know how different it would be. But when it happened in Denmark, somebody makes a remark. And I remember I went and told my boss, I said, this has now happened 3 times and I've just about had it. Somebody needs to have a conversation with this person and cut it out. And the first reaction, even one of my good friends, was like, but she's like that. And I'm like, I don't care what she is like. She needs to stop being racist at work. I don't want to put up with this. But in Denmark, when you say something, you are just, I am the sensitive brown girl. This is not a society that wants people to be different.
Don't we have the same issues here, though?
Yes. And I'll tell you why. The United States is the only, and I've lived in a few countries and been to several, is the one country I know where people say, I think we can do better. In Denmark, they'll say, if you don't like it, leave. Go. You don't like it. But here, it's like, oh, can we do something better? Before I left the US, I remember Europeans make fun of the American politically correct. I know a lot of the politically correct went out of the window because of the gentleman who was in the White House for a while. But I like politically correct. And I only realized that after being in Denmark. I'm like, no, keep your vomit to yourself. I don't want to know.
Some of it is good manners, is it not?
Yeah, but people, Danes will pride themselves on being direct. I remember I got in this elevator. I just moved from the US and I was there with my boss and a colleague of mine who was like 8 months pregnant. And my boss was a man, looks at her and says, my God, you're fat. And I'm looking at him and said, just shut up, just stop talking. And he's like, no, she looks fine from the back, but she's fat. I'm like, why are you still talking? Basics. And she couldn't understand why I was upset on her behalf. But be politically correct. I'm fine with that. I think everybody should be politically correct and keep their thoughts to themselves. I don't want to know everything that's going on. I don't want to know deep down how you feel.
You don't want my stream of consciousness.
No, I just want you to behave yourself. It's that simple. So I don't think
What
there's
do
any
you,
justice.
you wrote, you use real companies, you use real restaurants, you use real clothing, you use real drinks, you use real foods. How do you know? I mean, do you have some sort of legal counsel that has looked over this to make sure nobody is going to sue you for anything you do? Or how do you protect yourself in your research? Instead of making up something fictitiously, you've used real names.
Except the political party I is not real. I think when I'm being not so nice about something, I am careful. I have not heard anything from legal. Maybe I should ask at Morrow. Is anybody worried?
I'm pretty sure they ran it through legal. I'm just asking you for our readers.
So I don't know. I think this is something. I think Robert B. Parker said this in an interview once. He says, if I'm going to say something bad about a restaurant and make the name up, otherwise I keep it. And I think mostly, yeah, I didn't have to change much. But I did keep there Phil Smith and Allborg Cement. But then I cooked up the names of some of the architecture firms that don't exist to move the story along. So I kind of weave those two together. But I think, yeah, like even now, I was getting very close to, the name of the bank is Danske Bank. And I had put DK Bank, and my husband's like, yeah, you just change, just come up with something else that's a bit too close. The building is exactly where Danske Bank building is,
Well, I don't know any better. And reading it seemed awfully real. Everything seemed real, which is a credit to you.
I mixed it up. The menu is usually real. If the for that season.
From what I got in the acknowledgments, you wrote in a bunch of restaurants, so I'm
Yes,
assuming that you were eating while you were writing.
Yes, and the internet is a great place to go to. I spent some time doing that too, looking at wine lists and looking at menus. Oh, what would he order here?
I do recall when I was reading, I thought, I wonder how much wine and beer she does drink. Referring
a lot
to
of
you.
wine. Yeah, I do drink a lot of wine, not beer, but wine. Yes, I mean, I quit my corporate job a few weeks ago, not because I quit my corporate life. No, I just quit this job for mental health purposes. So I'm unemployed. So we decided, and my oldest son just graduated from university. So we decided we're going to go have, and my husband's doing his PhD, so he's on break, and my youngest son finished his first year. So we're going to go to Copenhagen for a little time, and then my kids are going to take the Eurorail and go do what they want to do, and my husband and I are going to go spend nearly 3 weeks in Burgundy drinking wine.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah, I mean, we have just one goal for every day is do 2 wine tastings a day.
What have we not covered about research?
If you're going to write about a restaurant, do go eat there if you can. But you use the internet from a research perspective. It makes life easier.
How much compare the internet though with actually going to Copenhagen or something to actually be there?
Oh yeah, I mean, yes. You can't catch that, right? I mean, you want to smell and, I mean, I've been to Berlin several times, so I know the streets of Berlin. I know the strassas. I know what they feel like. It's easier to write about places and you've been to, but the details you will forget. I mean, even though I know Copenhagen very well, I still forget the details. What is that place called again? What was that restaurant I used to go to? Then I have to go look in the map and, find, that's what it's called here. How do they spell this again? But I think, yes, from a research perspective, if you are wanting to set a whole set of books or somewhere, And if you have a chance to go there, go. Unless you're setting a book in Afghanistan or, Iraq, then don't go. Because I did set a book partly in Afghanistan. And I remember I talked to a friend of mine, she's a journalist for AP, and she said, "Oh, you should come to Kabul." And I'm like, "No, I don't think so. Just tell me what you know so I can learn from that and write it." And she's like, "No, you'll have a great time." I said, "I'm certain I'll have a great time." No, not doing that. But I think,
You're,
yes.
you're like me, an armchair researcher, right?
Yes. Give me a book, give me a clinical study, give me a peer-reviewed paper. I'll be good.
What any advice you have for new writers?
Edit all the time. I've met writers, especially when they are new, they'll say things like, "Oh my God, if I edit too much, it takes the essence away." And I always say, "No, it just takes the garbage away." Edit till you are so sick of that book. Because trust me, when the book is finished and you read it, you'll want to edit it again because you missed a few things. I tell everybody, edit, and don't fall in love with anything you write while you're writing it, because you may have to delete it. You may write 100 pages and realize I went on the wrong track, and now I gotta go delete those 100 pages
And take
and
out the footnotes.
yes, take out the footnotes. And a part of you is going to be like, "My God, I should save this because there must be something good here." Don't do that. Just let it go and start fresh. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. At least that's what I tell myself, to not feel bad.